So I'm going to be talking about relative fearfulness in Florida scrub jays. So for those of you that have not heard of a scrub jay before, have never seen one, this picture right here shows a scrub jay. And scrub jays, as Reed mentioned, are in the corvid family, and they have pretty complex family structures. Within a family, you have a breeding pair, helpers, and a juvenile. The breeding pair breeds every year, and cooperative breeders, the helpers, help in rearing the young of every year, and the juveniles are young, and they kind of hang out until they become helpers. They are really territorial birds and sedentary within their own habitats. So if you want to go back and find a bird that you saw the other day, it's probably going to be in the same spot you saw it. They constantly defend their own territories. They're also endemic to Florida, specifically Florida scrub habitat, and they are also fire dependent because they thrive best in low and open spaces for optimal foraging and for good sentineling behaviors. And they're also federally threatened and endangered by a variety of different anthropogenic threats. Their populations are currently declining. So for my study, I looked at neophobia and fearfulness. So we know in general that corvids are neophobic, and previous studies at Archbold have demonstrated that Florida scrub jays are also neophobic. So neophobic specifically means that a species, in this case of Florida scrub jays, are going to display fearful behaviors when looking at a novel object, strictly a novel object. And what that fearfulness might look like is that the birds sort of are hesitant to approach the object, or they like hop around it, don't want to look at it. Generally, really big hesitancy to spend quality time with the object. So I looked at scary objects, but also novel objects. So seeing the picture, we have a Lego. And the Lego, there's nothing in the environment of the scrub jay that would tell the scrub jay to be afraid of that Lego besides the fact that it is just novel. Versus the object I have on the other side is a tennis ball with eyes, which is also a novel object, but it's modified with eye spots. And those forward-facing eyes should signal to the scrub jays that there could be a potential threat there. So the significance of studying neophobia and fearfulness is that we think that neophobia is related to risk tolerance scores and exploration. So a more neophobic species, we believe, is going to be less likely to explore new foraging opportunities, and more likely to just kind of stay more comfortable in their own environments and a little bit less likely to adapt to a new environment. And since we know that studying fearfulness will deepen our understanding of the jay behavior in a way that can help us improve conservation initiatives, because as the jay world and the human worlds collide, the jays will be forced to confront with urban things they have never seen before that are scary and or new. We also don't know if neophobia is related to ecologically related traits. So the study would kind of help us see if there's any correlations, to see if the scrub jay would react the same to something that is completely novel to something that is novel and also mean to be scary. So overall, we hypothesize that birds would behave most fearfully towards something that is ecologically relevant or will give them some sort of ecological bias to believe that that thing might be threatening. And we also believe that birds in the overgrown risky habitats, and remember that since they're fire dependent, they thrive in open spaces. So tall overgrown habitats make it so that they have lower visibility and are more likely to be predated. Their preferred nesting habitats are decreased. And also scrub jay sentinels, so while they're foraging, one bird will stay up above and watch to see for predators and alarm calls. If it's overgrown, the sentineling behavior is not as efficient. So overall, birds are probably going to be more wary. So because of that, we hypothesize that overgrown habitats would cause birds to be a little bit more fearful in general. And since we have this bird with a really complex social structure, we wanted to see if sex or social class would affect how birds interacted with these scary objects. So I used the neophobia protocol method, which Archbold provides. And to do that, we designed an arena. And in the center of the arena, we have the object of choice, and under that arena are piles of peanuts. The birds at Archbold are all peanut tame, which means that if you pitch at them or throw peanuts, they will come towards you to eat the peanuts. And so it makes it a lot easier to try and lure them into this arena if they can see their reward. So we measured lots of things, like how long it would take a bird to grab a peanut from the center from underneath the object, how long it would take them to enter the outermost ring, which was 60 centimeters from the object. So latency to enter is 60 centimeters. Latency to enter 30 centimeters, which is that green circle, which is 30 centimeters away from the object. How long they spent 60 centimeters away from the object, and how long they spent 30 centimeters away from the object, and how many peanuts they ate in total. So after 2.5 months of data collection, we had about a total of 60 jays that participated in the trials, 15 territories, 10 of those in ideal low open habitats, and 5 in the overgrown tall and dense habitats. This is a picture of what the arena looks like in practice. So you can see there's like little sticks on the outer circle, and those are my 30 centimeter line. And we use sticks because we don't want to use something else to mark it so that I can see it that way. The bird to be afraid and not enter the arena at all. And then there's an outermost circle, a big fat pile of peanuts in the middle to lure those birds in, and of course the choice object. I would stand 10 meters away with a camcorder and then record for 10 minutes while the birds went in and out to try and grab peanuts from the object. These were the 4 models that I had. So 2 of them are neutral models and 2 of them are ecologically relevant, or allowing the birds to cue in onto something that would cause them to be a little bit more fearful. So I have the tennis ball with eyes, right? Because birds seeing something with forward-facing eyes would make them think of a predator. Most things that would predate on a scrub jay have forward-facing eyes. And then we have this red ball. And although there are not red predators that would eat a scrub jay, red we know is a warning signal throughout the animal kingdom. There are a couple studies that show that some birds are innately afraid of the color red. So we went ahead and tried to see if that could give us any sort of significance. We have a ball with triangles, which is not the plain control, but modified and just given a modification to the control for a modification. These 2 little triangles, I chose triangles because there's nothing in a scrub jay's environment that would tell it to be afraid of triangles. And then there's the plain ball, which is just the tennis ball on our simple control. So this is a video, let's see if this goes, of scrub jays interacting with the ball. I hope that plays all right. And then they sort of dance around it. This is the one tennis ball with eyes. And so I would be sitting 10 meters away, recording all of this, who's going in, what times, etc. So after my months of data collection, I put together some results. But first I'm going to show the correlations, because we took a lot of data. So we had all the latencies for 30, 60, total times, total peanuts. We want to see what was correlated with what. And so we look at latency to 60 in that top row. We have total time is the only one that is not correlated to latency to 60 centimeters. And latency to 60 centimeters is of course correlated with latency to 60 centimeters. So we chose both of those to focus on. The yellow shading shows the significant correlations between latency and total time. And the orange shading shows significant correlations between latency and total time. So here's our first graph. And this is grouped by habitat, ideal and overgrown, and by object. So this graph doesn't actually show any significance. This is our latency to enter the 60 centimeters. The neutral triangle tennis ball with eyes, the red one, are all pretty much the same in terms of object. There are no differences. And habitat here did not play any role in how the birds were interacting with the scary objects. But when we look at total time to 60 centimeters, we can see that the habitats have an effect on the birds, but the objects did. And so for this one, we did a pairwise comparison doing a Bonferroni test, which is what those little letters mean. So neutral ball and triangle ball both got letter A because they are not different from each other. But red ball and eyeball, they were the same also, but A's and B's are different. So then we have a clear distinction between our neutral models and our scary models. And so knowing the habitat quality didn't really have an effect, and also the latency didn't show as an effect. We went ahead and put together all of our habitats and focused on total time spent in the 60 centimeter ring. So what is really interesting about this graph is we can see that there's a difference between the objects when we get to the predator models, but we can see that juveniles, that we can see that there's a huge variation in how birds interacted with red ball and ball with eyes. Some birds spent a very little amount of time in the 60 centimeter ring, and some birds spent a lot of time. And so we want to know what was driving that difference. Was it sex? Was it social class? Why is there that difference? Is it all the birds? So we went ahead and did this next graph. In here, we can see that we went together and grouped all the neutral objects and the ecologically relevant, or the predator models, and grouped them together by social class. We have the breeders, the helpers, and the juveniles. And for here, we did a post hoc comparison. And we also assigned the letters for each grouping. So the letter A for breeders and the helpers, the letter A. So breeders and helpers did not differ, but juveniles, letter B, were significantly different, breeders and helpers. And juveniles overall spent most of their time in the 60 centimeter ring. Some juveniles were like the helpers and the breeders, and they spent just a little bit in the 60 centimeter, but the majority of them spent most of their time in the 60 centimeter ring. So in conclusion, the habitat quality did not play a role in fearfulness. And we really thought that it would, and I think that this has to do with our small samples, because only 5 of my territories are in overgrown habitats. Also, when I was doing the study, I had birds that were watching from far away, but not actively participating in the overgrown habitats. And so there's sometimes I had to go multiple times to that territory to see if the birds could come back in. And that in itself could signify that there was fearfulness at play. Birds interacted with the scary objects in different ways, right? So with a huge variation we saw in the red and the eye trials. And we saw the social class affected how much time was spent in 60. And overall, the juvenile birds were more fearful of those ecologically related traits that were associated with predators. So we think that this variation is probably related to experience. So we have some of the breeders that were acting like some of the juveniles that were acting like breeders and spending a little bit of time in that 60 centimeter, then we're spending time, most of their time in the 60 centimeter ring. And so we think that the more naive juveniles are probably still learning what looks threatening and are spending their time more far away from the object, versus juveniles that maybe have a little bit more experience have learned, oh, okay, this red ball is not threatening, this ball with eyes, whatever, and they go and get their peanut. We also think it would be really interesting to see if adult latency to approach the object is in any way correlated with how much time the juveniles spend in the 60 centimeter area. Because it could be that juveniles are watching for their parents to go in first before they go in, but we were unable to do that with my data. So a really great future study would be to focus on doing something like that. Or testing more objects to see how scary can we make an object. How scary can we make it so that even the breeders have to see if this is threatening or not threatening anymore? Adding a ball and adding appendages to it, or making it bigger, or making the eyes bigger, modifying it and see where that spectrum is. It would also be great to replicate this experiment in an area that is less exposed to human activity, because at Archbold are very used to us going in, we're riding around on our ATVs, doing all kinds of stuff there every day. So it could be interesting to go to an area where the scrub jays are familiar with humans, but don't want to approach you too closely. And that segues into my next slide. So the context and the importance of this is that as jays are forced more into habitats, they're going to be confronted with novel predators. So this is a cat, obviously, and has the 2 forward-facing eyes, and it's not a tennis ball. So if a juvenile bird that is still in the middle of its learning process is looking at this cat, there is no room for error, and that cat will predate on the juvenile scrub jay. So we think that because some scrub jays were in that 60 centimeter ring watching the predator, we think that there could be something innate going on, that they know that something with eyes could be scary, but eventually they learn how to distinguish what's threatening and not threatening. And of course, birds that are in the middle of figuring that out are more vulnerable to be predated by these urban threats. So this is a cat that is an indoor cat. This is Abby. This is one of the other interns' cats. So this Abby has not eaten any birds. All right, so I'd like to acknowledge the entire bird lab for helping me out. It's been a really great field season, and I can open up to questions.
Thank you, Elena. Let me look in the Q&A and see if we have some. So one question from Scott is, how many different family units did you observe? Sorry if I missed this, but do you think personalities of individual families impact their level of neophobia?
It could be. So it was a total of 15 different families, and each territory has a family. Sometimes a neighboring family would come and participate, but we did note who was related to who in every trial. Yes and no for the personality question, because we have birds that are bold, and in the past neophobia studies, even bold birds are neophobic. So we think that neophobia is probably unrelated to personality, and we are actually looking at something else.
Thanks. Another one from Karen Atwood. Any differences correlated to younger versus older juveniles?
That's a great question.
Are these all first-year birds, young Florida fledglings, or older?
So I believe the juveniles are between 1 and 2, but it depends how young the juveniles actually are, right? Because a 1-year-old juvenile is probably has not learned as much as a second-year-old. So I have information for that, but I haven't actually looked at that specifically for the juveniles. It'd be good to look at that.
Okay. Does the time of day make a difference? Did you always do your observations at the same time of day?
Within the same times of day, so between 8 and 9:30. Yeah, so I'm not sure if the time of day would make a difference. Later in the afternoon, the birds are less active, so we kind of had to do it a little bit earlier in the morning. I'm not sure how that would affect things.
Hannah on Facebook asked, do you have any specific examples of how understanding fearfulness might help us develop better conservation initiatives?
Yeah, so right, so if jays are moving into a human habitat and they see something like a bright cone, and there's some infrastructure happening next to an area where they would want to nest, they might not nest in their preferred habitat simply because there is something around that is just scary to them. And so knowing what is scary and what is not scary can help us figure out what areas to protect and where to keep human things out of their way. Or even if we know something that is scary, we can put it there so that birds don't go there, and we can use it as a deterrent. Yeah.
Robin asked, can you explain what you meant by social class?
Yeah, so in each family, there are 3 social classes. We have the adults or the breeders who breed every year. And then we have the helpers, which help them out, which are subordinate to the breeders. And they're the oldest children of the family. And then the juveniles, who are the youngest of the youngest and who are at the bottom. They're still learning everything.
No more questions? Well, yeah, so Robin also asked, do you think that hunger played a role in terms of birds that might be more hungry or more willing to approach that object because they want the food more?
That's a really interesting question. I hadn't thought of that. As far as I know, I don't think that the scrub jays here are like experience like particular pangs of hunger. I think they just associate the penis as being like treats. So that's probably why they're going into the arena less than a hunger motivation. It could be because they're hungry. I wouldn't know, but it's something to consider. Yeah.
I think one thing that you did well is that by doing it at the same time of day, you're maximizing the probability that hunger level is equal among all the birds.
Right.
Another question is, are the scrub jays intelligent like crows in that they might learn that the scary objects are really just innate objects pretty quickly and learn not to be scared of them?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how quickly crows learn that, but they definitely will probably have the capacity to figure that out, which is probably why the breeders found those objects threatening. They learned probably early on in their life how to clearly distinguish those types of things.
Did you repeat observations at the same families, and did they become less fearful over time?
No, so I did each object once in each family. So each family was tested 4 times, but with a different object each time. So it'd be really great to get more trials for each object at each territory.
Another question is someone who's unfamiliar with Archbold property. did you ever note variations in ambient noise at the time of the observations, and could that have had an effect?
That's a great question. It's mostly silent in the scrub. Sometimes you can hear distant trucks or cars passing by, but they're fairly quiet. I did not note that. That could have been to look at. Yeah, if writing down that there's like something loud that's passing through while the trial is going on. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it might be interesting because if the ambient noise was loud enough, that could affect communication, which in general could make birds
Yeah.
more wary. But I think you're
Mhm.
right. In general, ambient noise is pretty consistent at Archbold.
Mhm.